be afraid. Be very afraid. Be very, 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 very afraid. It's showtime.
Hello, and welcome to Video Scaries, a series where we look at the various bits and pieces of video that scared us senseless as kids, and we'll see if they can still scare us now, all these years later. And for this episode, we're going to be taking a dive into the world of anti-drug PSAs. For most of this episode, we'll be looking at films from the US, as they're far more terrifying than most of what we put out here in the UK, but either way, it's going to be a wacky trip, that's for sure. So for our first film of the day, let's take a look at Snake.
Hey, little dude, send your mama and daddy out of the room. I gotta get you up on this. You know who I am. Snake, dealing in weed, coke, crack, your choice. Take one hit and you'll do anything to cop more. Steal from your mama, lie, cheat on your homeboys. But hey, that's the price you pay when you deal with dudes like me. Now, some folks will tell you that I'm dealing in poison. But hey, do I look like the kind of guy that would do that to a kid like you? Yes!
This one provides mixed feelings for me. On one hand, I can see why children of 1980s America found this absolutely terrifying. You have this man talk to you in quite an abrasive and aggressive manner before transforming into some kind of human snake creature with a distorted voice. Now, for anyone under the age of 10, that's guaranteed nightmare fuel. But on the other hand, this ad probably wouldn't have the same impact today. With how much kids see these days, they would most likely be desensitized to PSAs like this, and it would probably provoke more laughter than fear. Nevertheless, this stands out as one of the most remembered pieces of 80s anti-drug ephemera, for better or for worse. Moving on, let's take a look at our next ad, another from America, Fish.
Sniffing things to get high can deprive your brain of the oxygen it needs to keep you alive.
Okay, so hear me out on this one. Whilst on the surface this doesn't seem overtly scary or terrifying to watch, I think it's the deeper meanings that make this eerie or horrifying. Firstly, as the water slowly decreases, I can't help but think of these poor fish and that they will not have much room to maneuver around this tank, which only causes them more stress or suffering. Now, I'm not accusing the creators of this of torturing living creatures, but it's still something that crossed my mind, and as we hear the narrator link this visual to the overall message they want to put across, the writhing sound of dozens of fish emphasizes the struggle and panic the brain goes through when it's deprived of oxygen. So this isn't one that is often talked about, but it's one that if you look into it has many horrifying connotations. Right then, next up we're going to take a look at an ad which I believe is from New Zealand. This is No Brainer. Well, we certainly took a turn there. This one is a prime example of the use of more graphic imagery to cause shock for audiences, and from that shock, fear. So it all starts simply enough, in a packed club with thumping music, but as our protagonist heads to the bathroom to do some drugs, we actually see him remove part of his brain to then inhale. The metaphor here is obvious, and it kind of reminds me of some of the anti-smoking adverts that we looked at last week. The graphic imagery here is quite repulsive, and the musical sting that plays after he's inhaled just shoots right through you. It's definitely one that would have made any children afraid, and one that is still remembered not just amongst New Zealanders, but one that seemed to make its presence known throughout the world. For our next film, we're heading over to Singapore, where they present us with the following video, Guinea Pig.
How much brain damage the designer drug ecstasy causes. It's still being tested. Take ecstasy, and you're the guinea pig.
Very, very haunting. Singapore as a country is very strict on its drug laws, and in some cases, I believe, being caught with drugs can even result in the death penalty. So it's kind of no surprise that this advert takes a very blunt, bleak, and brutal approach to a drug such as ecstasy. Everything about this screams horror film, from the slow, slightly distorted melancholy music, to the patient writhing about bound to a surgical chair surrounded by stark medical equipment and face-masked doctors. It definitely would have scared me as a kid, and even now it sends a little shiver down my spine upon viewing. One of the more powerful and on-the-nose drug PSAs that isn't for the faint of heart. Now we move on to our final clip of the day, and it's one that I'm sure many of you will have either seen or heard of before. Take it away, Pee-wee.
This is crack, rock cocaine. It isn't glamorous or cool or kid stuff. It's the most addictive kind of cocaine, and it can kill you. What's really bad is nobody knows how much it takes. So every time you use it, you risk dying. It isn't worth it. Look, everybody wants to be cool, but doing it with crack isn't just wrong. Could be dead wrong.
One of the biggest contrasts in advert history. For such a serious topic as dealing with crack cocaine, to choose a children's entertainer like Pee-wee Herman, whose show could have easily been conceived by people on various drugs, is quite astonishing. However, I think the message is delivered perfectly here. It's straight to the point, and at no moment is Pee-wee playing this for any kind of a laugh. And the gradual presence of the heartbeat and sudden stings towards the end, and are you surprised that this is so infamously remembered? Overall, all the memes and jokes aside, this is probably one of the most sincere and to the point anti-drug adverts in history. It doesn't waste any of its time with any clever metaphors or setting up any kind of characters, it just has a recognizable face, who wants to warn you that taking drugs could eventually take your life. And across the 5 films we've looked at today, you can clearly see the different kinds of tactics that each one employs to try and encourage the audience, mainly children, to either stop or stay away from drug use, many of them implying fear or shock tactics. And each probably had various degrees of success in their time of airing, but one thing is for certain, their legacy, for whatever factor that may be, is not to be forgotten in the footnotes of TV history. And with that, that concludes this installment of Video Scaries. I hope you enjoyed basking in the nostalgic clips that once upon a time made us cower or shriek with terror. And what's to take away from today? I think it's the following.
Look, everybody wants to be cool, but doing it with crack isn't just wrong. It could be dead wrong.
Thank you for watching, we hope you like, subscribe and share the video around, and we hope to see you next time.